sponsored by the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Good evening, and welcome to the 2021 Library of Congress National Book Festival. I'm Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress, and I am excited and honored tonight to welcome Ms. Nikki Giovanni. And before we begin, I just want to let you know that there will be time at the end of this live event to respond to your questions, so you can start submitting them now on loc.gov BookFest. I'm excited because as a librarian, I know that Ms. Nikki Giovanni is the author of more than 24 books for adults and children, including the New York Times bestselling Bicycles, Love Poems, Hip Hop Speaks to Children, and Rosa. She has also published works of nonfiction and multiple recordings, including the Nikki Giovanni Poetry Collection, which was nominated for a Grammy Award. And tonight, Ms. Giovanni joins us from the campus of Virginia Tech, where she has taught for over 3 decades. So welcome and hello, Ms. Nikki. It's been a while since we've been together, but this is wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to see you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm sorry I'm not as well as I should be to be able to come over to DC, but I'm delighted to be a part of the program. And Carla, it's so nice of you to think of me. And thank you for the nice words. Thank you.
Well, as the young people say, I'm a fangirl. So you have to know that. Because to begin with, you know, as a response to the festival's theme this year is Open a Book, Open the World. And I have to start with one of my favorite poems, your poem from Acolytes. And it said, it's my first memory of librarians. And I promise everyone, this is the only time I'm going to read the poem. But my first memory of librarians. This is my first memory. A big room with heavy wooden tables that sat on a creaky wood floor. A line of green shades, banker's lights down the center. Heavy oak chairs that were too low, or maybe I was simply too short for me to sit in and read. So my first book was always big. In the foyer, up 4 steps, a semicircular desk presided. To the left side, the card catalog. On the right, newspapers draped over what looked like a quilt rack. Magazines face out on the wall. The welcoming smile of my librarian, the anticipation in my heart, all those books, another world, just waiting at my fingertips. You captured it. And I just want you to share, if you could, with all of us, the part that librarians and libraries played in your life and your development, because the next poem right next to it is dedicated to your librarian.
Yeah, Mrs. Long, I'll always remember her, and I forget half the time I don't remember my name, but I remember Mrs. Long. She's from Iowa. But what I'm amazed, let me just put it this way, and I'm not in a bad mood, Carla, but I'm amazed that people don't spend time in the library. How could you not be proud of going to, in my case, it was the Carnegie Library. And it was during segregation, and we didn't know, I was a little girl, so I didn't know that segregation was a bad thing. I know that I could walk up, and it was because we lived on the hill, I could walk up Mulvaney Street to Vine Street to the Carnegie Library. And of course, Mrs. Long was there, and she would always say, "Hi, Yolanda." I was born Yolanda. "Hi, Yolanda. What can we do today?" And it was always something. I was reading, I think, sort of crazy books. I was reading Darwin when nobody else was reading Darwin. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know at that point when she had to go get. I wanted also to read Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, and I didn't know when she said, "Well, I'll have to get those tomorrow." And what she had to do was go up to the White Library to get those books. And I was grown, I was old before I realized what she must have gone through to get these books for a Black kid. Because I know somebody said something to hurt her feelings. Somebody, "Well, what do you all want with that?" I know nobody. there had to be something that she had to take, something she had to listen to. Yet she always brought me books that I wanted, that I was interested in. Then she'd always ask me about it. So it was really, I'll always remember her. And I don't think I think the library is the most important thing. And if I could say one thing, since you are the librarian of Congress, Congress needs to read a few books so that they can make a little more sense than they're making right now.
And that's why with the Library of Congress is there to serve them. And what's interesting is, and I couldn't help but react when you said you wanted to read Darwin and Rachel Carson. How old were you?
I was, I guess, 10, 11 years old. I was just always interested in something crazy, something that probably most kids weren't reading, but I wanted to know, how did the world evolve? It was and we still are, a crazy world. And I'm reading a book right now that says we evolved from the fish. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting that we came, and it makes sense that we came out of the ocean. We just kind of walked on shore and kind of looked around and thought, well, I'm not going back there, I'll go here. And I am, of course, as you know, because we've talked before, I'm a big space freak. And I'm really just excited about going to Mars. And I'm working with, they're not going to send me to Mars, but I'm working with NASA. And I think, what do I need? And I finally figured out what I really need in order to go to Mars. I need my dog, I need some champagne, and I need some music. And I think that I could make it, that it would be a lovely trip.
I think we could all like that. And so space and NASA, in fact, I think you have a poem dedicated to space and what it would be. And
I have a lot of poems. My favorite poem, though, I'm a Fisk University graduate. And I'm very fortunate. My grandfather graduated Fisk in 1905. But I wanted to share this poem particularly with you because I think that we forget the strength that it took for the people who saved. We all like the people. We all like Frederick Douglass. I think he was cute. I don't have any problem with that. We all are very proud of Harriet Tubman. And we like all of those people that took these important steps. But we forget the people who stayed, no matter how awful. And there were a lot of awful things that happened. So when we finally get to 1955, Rosa Parks is not going to take it anymore, but that's another way. But I think about the people who stayed. And I should have said on the poem, I should have said dedicated to the 13th Amendment, but I assumed that everybody knew, but now I know that it's not. But I wanted to share this because if those people had to stay, you and I couldn't be where we are. But some of us stayed. We forget the strength of those who stayed behind. We sometimes don't recognize what it took to decide to build a church, a school, a store, to sell the yams we picked from the ground, the tomatoes we carefully watched turn red on the vines, to seek the okra pods, as well as to pick our own cotton. We took pride in our work and lovingly encouraged our daughters to dream. We sent them, our daughters, to school then, to college, and they stayed to help others. 100 years is not so long when we plant love with patience, when we find that song that gives us the strength to go on. And I just wanted to say something. I want to give a shout out to the women, because the women had to be the ones, we were the ones going to school, we were the ones learning to read, not that the men didn't, because our brothers and our husbands all were out working, and they were proud that we were going to school, and we all are. But I think it's so important to remember what the women did to lift all of us up. I just think it's important. I think that we forget it, and it needs to be remembered. It just needs to be, we need to give a shout out to the women.
And the people who stayed, who farmed. And you also have been pretty outspoken about talking about the role of women that continues. And that's how it brought in Rosa Parks, but that it's still women.
Well, women are important. You forget, and it's easy, I think, to forget that even in slavery, the women are going to wake up before dawn. They're going to wake up at the gray, and they're going to start dinner not breakfast, they're going to start dinner, and they're going to cook dinner. And I still like my food that cooks all day long. They were going to start, you know, a stew or whatever they were doing, but it was going to cook all day so that when everybody came home from the field, they would have a hot meal. And I think that that was important. But they started dinner, then they started breakfast, then they called the men, and the men got up and ate their breakfast. Not that they, don't misunderstand, the men did the work, did a lot of work, but the women made sure they had that. And when we get to 1955, when we get to Rosa Parks and we get to the Montgomery bus boycott, we're going to have the women doing that and making lunch and giving lunch to the men so that they did not have to get on those buses. So the bus boycott that everybody said, oh, it won't last, they'll have to ride the bus. But the men did last because the women made sure that they had something to eat and that we were proud of what they were doing. And I think it's important to again, I think it's so important. And one of my favorite points, which I don't have here, Carla, at all, is on the Million Man March, because I think the hardest thing about the Million Man March was not that the million men went, because I'm proud of them and anybody would be proud of them, but the fact that the women had to stay home and pretend that they weren't worried. Because if you were a Black woman and your son or your husband or your brother was going to the Million Man March, you're going to be very much concerned that he won't return. And even now, one of the things that's happening with the women, if my son is 51 years old, when you start to look at your children, you're afraid every time they leave the house. You're wondering, will they return? It's frightening. It's frightening. We need to do something about that.
And you mentioned love. And so there's that double-edged sword with love. It's worry, you love, you're happy, but then there's all of that. And your whole book titled Love Poems is love in many different ways now, from loving food to loving all types of things.
Well, I am a foodie, that's the truth. But there's a lot to do with love. I have like many Black women, I have high blood pressure, and my doctor has been on my case about it. He said, you know, Nikki, you got to slow down. You know, doctors, and you're a Black woman, the first thing they say, no matter what it is, first thing they say is you got high blood pressure. And so my doctor, who is cute, and I always laugh because if he wasn't cute, I wouldn't listen to him. And he says, you got to slow down, which I've been trying to do. But I have a fish pond. I have some goldfish. So when I come home I teach at Virginia Tech. They haven't fired me yet. And when I come home, I pour myself a glass of champagne and go and sit in the fish pond, and the fish just swim around. And I know my blood pressure just going down. You need either some goldfish or you need to grow some, of course, some rosemary. If you got a window, grow some rosemary, because just coming into your house smelling the rosemary will make you relax. And of course, a glass of champagne with it will always
that never hurts. And
that never hurts.
The wonderful pleasures of good wine and nature, and that just flows through all of your poems too. And when you published your first book of poems in 1968, when you think about this journey and how you've grown as a poet, certain things have been there from the beginning. So how would you characterize that journey and where you think you are right now?
I think all that I know, Carla, and we are going to be in the same room on this one, I think. All I know are words, as all you know are books, and those are going to be a combination. I can't sing, I can't dance. My sister was really a very pretty woman, and you can look at me and say, I'm not that pretty. I wasn't stylish. I couldn't play the piano. So what did I have? I could watch. And that's what writers do. Writers watch. So I watched. My parents had a troubled marriage, and eventually I had to leave. I went to live with my grandparents, and very fortunate I had I had a grandmother who was wonderful, is what I'm saying. I should say it's a great grandmother. But all I had were words. And words are meaningful to me. And so I don't want anybody to take words away from me. I don't want Black people, white people, I don't want anybody to take words away from me, because words are all I have. And words are what I have to offer. People can take it, or people, and I mean no disrespect. They can take it or they can leave it. I've never been in a public space that the door is locked. And we laugh about that because I have said some things that people do. Oh, don't you think that that upsets people? I said the door was open when they came in. The door is open when they leave. But I'm going to say what I have to say, because all I have are words. And some of those words, when I'm lucky, turn into love. And some of those words turn into disturbing some people. But I'm just there. So if you're disturbed, that's your problem. That's not my problem. Sometimes you need to be disturbed because some things are disturbing. And I have such a great admiration for Black Lives Matter, because those young women thought, yeah, it's time that people were disturbed. It's time that people realize Black lives matter. And it matters to us, but it matters to everybody. And it was lovely to see the globe, because that went all over Australia, Perth, Australia. It was just lovely to see that those young women had engaged the planet. And we're going to have to continue to engage the planet in some of the needs that we see. We're just going to have to continue to do that. We can do that. We are capable of doing that.
I was fortunate to be in the audience several years ago at a History Makers event, and it was in Martha's Vineyard, and everybody was so excited that you were going to speak and everything, and you caused a disturbance. You said a few things that my mom even remembers when she watches the news at times and says, you know, Nikki Giovanni talked about that. She said that. How do you feel about being, quote, right about things sometimes?
I just think that I try to tell the truth about things. And I'm old enough, and probably always was, but I know I'm old enough to know that I cannot change the world. I accept. But what I know is that I will not let the world change me. I think that whatever it is that I have to give, I have some truths to give. I have, there's some laughter. I'm a Black woman, and Black women, despite all of it, we still find a way to laugh. And I love, one of my favorite spirituals is Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. And I love it because of that sometimes. Not all the time, not every day, but sometimes. And I think, oh, if I had been enslaved, would I just sometimes feel like a motherless child? And I just think that that's so incredible that these people could come through what we have come through, and there's still going to be a sometimes, which means sometimes not. I think it's incredible to be a Black American, and I would certainly recommend it. And if you were going to be a Black American, I would recommend being a Black American woman.
Recommend it. That sounds like it's something, because you were part of the Black arts movement in the 60s and 70s, and just something, and the generations afterwards followed. I also was fortunate to recently see your interview with James Baldwin that you did. Would you please talk about that some, because it's being shown in a documentary about the show, I think it was called Soul.
Soul. Mm-hmm.
And
so I say to the young people, I'm not trying to mentor anybody or anything like that. I'm close to a couple of youngsters that I've taught. But one of the things that I wanted to point out, and I've got you here, so people are going to be listening, you have to be careful of what they allow you, whoever they is, allow you to pay you. And when Soul started, Ellis Hazlett, who was the founder of Soul, just came up to, I lived up on Amsterdam Avenue. My next door neighbor, by the way, was Morgan Freeman. And I lived next door. And so Ellis came up and said, what do you think we should do? And I said, Ellis, I think you should be the host. It's your show. You should be it. He said, I'm not sure. Well, he had a list. And he said, well, I'm not sure. I said, it's your show. You should do it. And he said, well, I'd like to hire you. And something said, don't be hired. I said, give me a holler, I'll do it. And so I started to work with Ellis, but I wouldn't accept any money because somehow something just said, be careful. You always have to be careful who you take money from. At the end of the show, at the end of the year, Ellis owed me, and he knew he owed me. And everybody knows I'm a foodie, so there are a lot of great restaurants, as you know, in New York. And he said, okay, I owe you. Where would you like to go? What would you like? And I said, I'd really love to talk to James Baldwin, but I don't know how to do that. And he said, oh, I know Jimmy. He said, I'll give him a call and see if he'll talk to you, which is how that happened because he owed me. And he called Mr. Baldwin, and Mr. Baldwin said, he was in St. Paul de Vence, his home. And he said, well, he said, I'd love to talk to Nikki, but I'm busy. Will she mind coming to London? And I love London. And I was like, oh, yeah, we'll go. And my son and my babysitter, Debbie, and Debbie died of cancer, Debbie Reynolds. And Debbie, the three of us went to London. And Jimmy is a night owl. And I have a child, a young boy, who is getting up early in the day. So Jimmy would be coming in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'd be getting up for breakfast. And Thomas was just, Jimmy's was so good with children. And Thomas would, Jimmy Baldwin, take me for a walk. And Jimmy was, probably hungover. And he would say, well, I'll take you later. Jimmy Baldwin, take me for a walk. So Jimmy had to take him for a walk. And this is one of the ways that we got to be close. But we worked at night. So we started shooting that at about 8 o'clock at night. It was shot in London. And you can see the difference between how the British look at film and how Americans do, because Jimmy and I both talk with our hands. And so you'll see a lot of hand movement. And it was wonderful. And we weren't sure. There were things that I thought should be said or should be asked. And he's Jimmy Baldwin and I'm not. But I was nervous, and that's the truth. I mean, he's a great writer. But I thought that there are some things that I have responsibility to a generation. So I tried to do a good job. And I think I did the best job that I could. And Jim and I became friends. It was
It's inspirational. I would encourage anybody to look at that interview because you see the passing almost of the baton too. And he acknowledged that with you, and to have that. And so you mentioned that you are working with some poets and artists right now. Would you, any you could share with us? Or
well, it's the same 20 years, and it's really funny. Jimmy's 20 years older than I am. I work with Kwame Alexander, for example, and I really love Kwame, with Jordan Holmes, whom you may not know. He is a Chicagoan. And Randy, who was a rapper, wanted to do an interview with me. And I said yes, because you have to say yes to most things. But Randy, it was really funny, is 20 years younger than I am. And I said, do you realize that we've got this 20-year thing going? And in 20 years, somebody's going to come up and ask you for the same thing. And she said, yeah, I guess so. I said, this is how we keep the story going. And I just talk, I say yes to almost everything that I can. I've had some, as we all have, you get to be 78 years old. I've had some health issues, but I try to get along to talk to people, to do things. And I'm working with Prairie View A&M. Have started a Toni Morrison workshop. And I love Toni so much. We were good friends. And right now I'm Zooming on that, but I'm going to go down to, probably in the spring, we'll be going down to A&M to help set up what I think Toni would have wanted her workshop to be, and to help make sure that we're bringing in some other people, because, they're right. A&M is right outside of Houston, and A&M needs to reach out, I think, to Houston a little more, because there's a lot of talent in Houston. And I think a lot of people enjoy writing. I don't think you can think Carla, about writing as I'm going to write and make a bestseller. I think you have to say, I'm going to write the most honest book that I can, or the most honest poem that I can. And so I like to make sure that while I am working with A&M, we can bring them A&M closer to the Houston community.
Yes, and it also sounds like what you just said about writing the truth, not writing for a bestseller, is advice that you would give young writers or people who were thinking about it, because you've been teaching since 1987.
Yeah.
And in Virginia Tech, they still want you.
So still do.
Is that part of it too, being able to share what you've learned and your experiences with others, that keeps you going?
Well, literature, as we do know, is important. And I have been lucky here at Virginia Tech because my mentor here is Virginia Fowler. And some of you have talked with Jenny. I'd be lost without Jenny because she understands all of this. But mostly, she and I can discuss literature. We look at things not all that differently, but a little differently. So I have someone that I can learn from. And I think I'd be pretty much lost without Jenny. So I think I'm very lucky. She brought me here. She what do you call it? She
Recruited.
what is it?
Recruited you?
Yeah, she recruited. She recruited me, and then made sure that everybody kind of took care of me, because there was some controversy about me staying. I was the only Black person at that point, and there were some people here in the department, the English department, who said that if Nikki Giovanni comes, they were going to leave. And Jenny went over to, we call her Jenny, went over to the president of the university and said, this is what's happening. And he came over to the English department and said goodbye to the two colleagues. And so I stayed, I'm here. And Jenny understands all of it, how university functions. So I owe her a lot. This has been, I'm a Hokie. It's home. And if I hadn't been happy, I shouldn't be here, but I am happy and I'm very proud. I'm a Black relation. All of us in Appalachia, the Blacks and the Appalachians have a lot in common. And it's one of the things, even though I teach mostly right now, children's literature, it's one of the things that I keep trying to remind people, that the Blacks and the white Appalachians have a lot in common. You can look at our food, you can look at our quilts, you can look at a lot of things that we do. Listen to our music. Phil Everly just died a few years ago. And what were the Everly brothers? They definitely were listening to Black American music. So we have things in common. And what we're really hoping is that the Appalachian community will regain its courage, because it was very important that the Appalachian community pulled away from Virginia, and their license plate should say it, that we will not send our sons to die so that the Shenandoah can have slaves. And they pulled away from Virginia. If they hadn't done that, the Civil War would have gone differently. And I think that that's something that needs to be taught. The white Appalachians need to know that they did something not only courageous, but correct.
That certainly gets lost. And you mentioned too that you're doing mostly teaching children's literature, and you've had poetry for adults and children. And I wondered, as a children's librarian still at heart, what are the things that you do differently, if you do, when you write poetry for children? You did the hip hop poems and you do that. And what are there more things in common in terms of that?
I think I just do what I think makes sense to me. And I talk to my students a lot. And I've ruined a couple of vacations for them because I really dislike Thanksgiving. But also, I'm trying to help my students understand, okay, let's look at Little Red Riding Hood. And everybody thinks, oh, Little Red Riding Hood is out in the forest and the wolf is going to get her. Well, what we had was the red fever, scarlet fever. And we have Little Red Riding Hood's mother putting a red outfit on because the doors that had the red doors, people knew not to come in. Now, Little Red Riding Hood's mother is going to have to stay in the city, and she's going to send her daughter to the grandmother. So she gives her everything that she has. She gives her the food, she gives her the cheese, and sends her through. Now, other people are going to come along that I don't like, and I'm not going to go through all of that. But your basic racists will come along and say, well, the wolf was going to get, the wolf was not. Nobody was, she got through to her grandmother, which is where you go when everything else goes wrong. You put your red on and you recognize, okay, I am a part, I am to be left alone. So I have my students looking at the folk tales and looking at them differently. The folk tales are not just, oh, isn't she cute? Isn't this, Walt Disney? Or you look at Snow White and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it's like Snow White met the prince. But Snow White didn't wake up until she had the baby. And that's what we have to remember. So we have to say, oh, let's talk about that. So I just try to get my students to think about what they're hearing. And of course, being a Black American, I know not all, but quite a few of the spirituals. And I keep wanting, and I'm hoping some of my students, or one of my students will, that someone will put together, will research the combination of the spirituals and the folk tales, and how the people who, in both cases, as we both know, were illiterate, got the stories told to their children so that their children could be safe.
Miss Nikki, I wish I could take a class. You are changing the way that you even think about children's literature and what we think, and it's just exciting to hear it. And I think that 3 decades, your classes are probably all filled up before they even go on. They probably have a waiting line. I have to ask you, and I want to tell people to send in your questions because I could go all night. So you send in your questions, everybody that's streaming. Would you read one of your favorites, another favorite from your new book, if you would mind?
One of my favorites, because all poets write love poems because we're always falling in love. And I asked my students, by the way, I've already written this book, but I did ask my students, if you weren't a human being, what would you be? And I know what I would be if I weren't human. If, I got a call and God said, okay, Nikki, we're tired of you being a human being. What you want to be? I would want to be rain, because rain changes and becomes everything. And everybody loves rain, even though rain can be pretty serious, but I would want to be rain. And that's how I ended up with a book called Make Me Rain. And this is one of my favorite love poems. Make me rain. Turn me into a snowflake. Let me rest on your tongue. Make me a piece of ice so I can cool you. Let me be the cloud that embraces you, or the quilt that keeps you dry. Snuggle close. Listen to me sing on the windowsill. Make me rain on you. And I just think that's the most... It's a love poem, but I like it.
You're smiling and everything. It's wonderful. And you love, and there are certain poems that speak to you even more and make you smile. Are there some that make you cry?
There are some songs that do. One of them is quilts. I write a lot about quilts, but I don't have it with me, Carla. I'm sorry. But
we don't want to see you cry right now, so that's okay. We don't want you to cry.
It's okay.
We'll pick up that one, and we'll make sure that we do that, because the emotion that goes into it. Do you feel after you've been writing, or do you sometimes you're smiling and sometimes you're crying? Do you have to take a nap, or is that when the champagne comes out?
I do nap sometimes. I remind my students, as I would remind whoever is with us on this, you are your first reader. So the first person that has to be satisfied with what you've written is you. And you have to keep that in mind. You're not writing for anybody else. You're writing for you. So even Make Me Rain, but especially we were talking about Those Who Stayed. Those Who Stayed brings tears to my eyes, because that was not only dangerous, but it was sad. And Kwame Dawes, whose poetry I think is so wonderful. And Kwame talks about finding a body in the tree and having to wipe the sweat off, the spit off that body. And you had to do things, and then you still had to find a way to go on. And that'll make you cry. You listen to some of the stories that get told. But we also know that there were fun things, that there are things that make you, that are going to make you smile. And so you have to take both of them at all. And I talk about, in this book, I talk a lot about song, because music is so important to me. And you're talking about, and I've often wondered, I have no way of knowing, of course, what did Jesus sing as he was on the cross waiting to transition? What was that song? And I know that there had to be, because what do? You have to be, had to be humming something. And the Roman soldier who threw, they said it was a sword, but it couldn't have been a sword because swords are too heavy. It would have split him. It had to be just a regular knife, a little knife. But how did he know that Jesus had transitioned? He had to know, because there was no more music. So where did the music go? And so that's what I've been working on. That's what I'm just curious. Where did the music? So Jesus passed the music to somebody. All I know is that we're the people who sing in it. So I think it's really, I think it's an awesome thing.
That's really something. And as I mentioned, a children's librarian, so I love your book, Rosa. And it's been a compliment to the Library of Congress's exhibit, Rosa Parks in Her Own Words. And the exhibit is online, and they're rarely seen materials from her that give you an intimate view of her, including her yoga poses and things like that. And you've written about her and actually knew her. And could you talk about your relationship with her? Because you have poems.
Well, I knew her. I don't talk a lot about my relationship with a lot of the famous people I know, because otherwise it's not fair. They don't want to talk to you. But I will share this one story about Mrs. Parks, which is really funny. When she had moved up to Detroit, and I had an opportunity to see her. Miss Troy was, as you know, was a tea drinker, and I'm a coffee drinker. And we were there, I was I was having coffee, and I said to her, Miss Parks, it's amazing when I think about your life that you only made one mistake. And Miss Parks was a very cool person. Everybody who knows you, will tell you that she could take anything. So, but her face dropped. It kind of caught her off guard. And she said, well, what would that be, baby? And I said, you went AKA, because I'm a Delta.
Oh, that's right. You're a proud Delta. Proud Delta.
My sorority sisters really, we get a big kick out of it, because the AKAs, of course, the Deltas, because after all, now you got a vice president, AKA, and it wouldn't have happened if the Deltas hadn't decided, we're going to march. No matter, Susan B. Anthony's, didn't want the Deltas to march. She didn't want any black women.
They were in the back.
And
they were in the back.
We said, we're going to march. We don't care where we have to march. We know that it's important to march. And of course, one of the most important people, period, was Fannie Lou Hamer. Miss Hamer was so important when she told Lyndon Johnson, I didn't come here for no 2 seats, and went back to Mississippi when she had, as you know, formed the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And Lyndon Johnson wanted her to accept 2 seats and kind of, we'll forget about it. And she told the president of the United States of America, we didn't come here for no 2 seats. And you have to love Miss Hamer for things like that, And of course, my sorority sister, Barbara Jordan, who was a great woman, is one of the reasons we were able to get rid of Richard Nixon. So, you really need, you need some.
You need those women. You need those women. Well, the questions are coming in, and Nick asked one that I had already asked you to read one of your favorite poems from your new book. And so, is there another one that you really like? Your second.
Well, I really like quite a bit. I had a boyfriend, and his name was Nate. And Nate, I'm going to look for the poem while I find it. Nate ran numbers. And I don't know if you almost have to be age to run numbers, but Nate ran numbers. And I don't know why my mother liked him and why she trusted him. I really, really don't. But I like the blues. And my mother would let me go. I could actually date Nate, and she would let me go out. And Big Maybelle, I'm going to find it because I want to look.
Big Maybelle was a blues singer?
Oh, yeah, the blues singer, Big Maybelle. And Nate decided, he heard that Big Maybelle was going to be at over in Newport. Cincinnati had the clean music, and Newport had the dirty. And Nate asked my mother, could he take me to hear the blues? And Mommy said yes. I don't know why she said yes. I really don't, because she should have known better. But I went. I didn't drink then. Actually, I didn't really. And I talk about alcohol, but I didn't really drink until I came here to Virginia Tech. But it's the truth.
It sounds like, I hear some editorializing there going on. It sounds like Mr. Nate was a smooth operator. If he could run numbers and press your mom, he was
we
quite
walked
something.
in, everybody knew Nate. This is I'm looking at this. I'm looking for the one on Big Maybelle, and I'm having trouble finding it.
Well, that's okay. When you find it, because
no, she's right here. I know. I have my hand on the blues, but
and everyone about Big Maybelle, which really you sounds good.
Big Maybelle was the one that said candy. They call my sugar candy, and I always we went to the store to the nightclub, and we walked in. Everybody knew Nate, of course, because Nate ran the numbers. And I sat down and I ordered a gin fizz, which we all know isn't really it's not really a drink.
This was quite a joint, huh?
I had a gin fizz, and Big Maybelle, and she was big. She walked out on that stage, candy. I call my sugar candy, and of course, I love the blues. I loved her singing that, and it was wonderful that I was sorry that they cleaned up the blues. Let me share this particular poem, though. This is the other side of the blues, because everybody wants to make the blues sad, and there's nothing sad about the blues. Some folk think the blues is a song or a way of singing, but the blues is history, a way of telling how we got here and who sent us. The blues may talk about my man or my woman who left me and took my money and is gone. But what they mean is I was stolen in an African war, and ignorantly stolen, probably not realizing to a new world, but the Lord is good and gave us a song to tell our story. We sang the blues in the cotton fields, not to complain about our lives, but to let each other know we are still here. We stirred the blues in our stews to give us the strength to go on. And Lord have mercy, we use the blues to give us the strength to make us laugh, to teach us how to love and dance and run away. And much more, thank the Lord, how to stay until the next day. The blues is our history, our quilt, the way we fry our chickens, the way we boil our greens, the way we make some really good something to drink. The blues is our encyclopedia, and no matter who tries to copy us, only we know the real meaning of those songs. And I just love the blues. And just think about it right now, the spirituals. they used to think about the Spirit say, God's going to set this world on fire. Yes, 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 God going to set this world on fire one of these days. And I like that, one of these days. Hallelujah. And now we look and the world is on fire.
There you go.
And then
Right,
200 years ago, they were saying that God's going to set this world on fire. And I just love what the spirituals and what the blues, I just love what we have done and how our youngsters have to learn to listen to what the old people are saying, what the ancestors have said. Not, they need to get off Facebook and Twitter and, all of that stuff. They need to come back to say, what did I learn in church? What did my grandmother, my great-grandmother teach me? What have I learned? And they need to be proud of what they've learned.
And this leads into a question from Terrence, who wants to know, how do you feel about the new poets like Amanda Gorman and how they are inspiring new poetry lovers? I mean, that was the phenomenon. Poetry took over for a while.
I think that I'm very proud to see any youngster coming up. So I was looking at Amanda, and I think she did a really wonderful job. Her poem was wonderful, and I was glad to see that she is, or was, I don't know where it is now, number one, I think, on Amazon that people are. Yeah. But I really have to say, poetry was not lost. In all fairness to all of the poets, going, Paul Laurence Dunbar, who did Maya Angelou? I know why the cage bird sings. Paul Laurence Dunbar. Where are we going to get this?
That's right.
Where did we get, Incident by County Cullen? Everybody knows. I was on a subway in London, and one of they have long lines, and they're saying things there. And one of the poems there was, I've known rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. We got in London, and I guess that was like 20 years ago, but we have Langston Hughes. So I'm glad that people are listening to poetry, but we've never not had poetry. And poetry has evolved. Poetry has evolved into blues. Poetry has evolved, or through, I should say, blues, and through, of course, jazz. And I'm really proud of the rappers. I think one of the great losses, by the way, was the loss of Tupac Shakur, because Tupac had not just energy and courage, but he had something to teach us, and he did that. And that's one reason he was assassinated. He did his job. And so I'm glad that poetry is getting some attention from some of the people who perhaps did not pay attention. Right. But some of us have always been, not just me, Nikki, but poetry has always had its fair share of attention.
Tupac Shakur, just as a little side note, at 16, won a contest at the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore when he was at the School for the Arts. He won the rap contest, and it was a library rap, and they have it in a vault right next to their Edgar Allan Poe material. Okay, you got Tupac and Poe together, and that. So, question, Cordelia wants you to talk about your recordings. And what do you love about hearing a poem as opposed to reading a poem?
I like both. And I was a friend, and I miss her so much too, of Nina Simone. And one of Nina's favorite songs was Night Song, which is one of the songs for those of us my age from the play Golden Boy. If you remember Golden Boy, you might remember Golden Boy. And Night Song is really a sweet, it's really a spiritual in its own way. And I am working with Javon Johnson, and we are doing spirituals. He and I were talking about it. It was one of those like, oh, we ought to do an album. And so we are. And I think that it will be out. It will start to come out, I should say, in October. But I said to Javon, the only way I can do this, and I cannot sing, is if I'm allowed to sing. I want to sing Night Song, and I wanted to sing it for Nina, because I remembered Nina. I love Nina, and I wanted her remembered. I don't think that Nina is remembered the way that she should be. And Night Song is such a sweet song. So I like to hear it all. I like to hear people read it. I loved, Margaret Walker and I were very close. I loved. I mean, you could not hear For My People by anybody any better than Margaret. I mean, Margaret she was wonderful. We would cook together, by the way, and Margaret could cook.
Really?
So it was always a lot of fun. I would go down to Mississippi. She's in Jackson, and Mississippi has now finally put her on the writers' trail because for the
Good.
longest they didn't want any Black writers. So Jackson State finally got them and made them do that. And Margaret Walker is a part of that. Is a part of that.
Right there with
Mississippi
Harper
Writers.
Lee and all of that. Good. Because
Yeah.
and just hearing you talk about all of the people you've had experiences with, it sounds like it was not just a sisterhood, but a community of support too.
Mhm. I think so. And again, one of the things, I have a bad memory. So one of the things that I know that everybody knew in talking to me was that they could tell me anything and it wasn't going anyplace because I wasn't trying to use anybody. And I have my papers are at the Boston University. So when those papers come out, everybody's going to go, oh my God. But I could listen to people and I could share with them. And I think that was important. And the people that I loved, I don't have to say this, Carla, but the people that I loved, I loved. And the people that I didn't. And so it recently came up. Somebody asked me about another singer who's still with us. And they said, oh, she's going to come. I said, I hate her because I do. I think she's narrow-minded and crazy. But I said, I don't mind being me. And so I was very fortunate that I had good friends and that the people who were my friends, and I mentioned Margaret because I used to fly down, my son, and I used to fly down to Jackson because Margaret was always a comfort. She's like your grandmother. I lost my grandmother. I got Margaret. But some other people that I knew that I was close to, that Toni Morrison, and I could sit all afternoon and probably say 3 words because it was just whatever it was, we were friends. It was just the comfort of the friendship and knowing that we're not trying to use each other. And you do get tired of people trying to use you. That's the truth. And so you're always looking for somebody who cares about you. And I think it's only fair. And I know, that everybody says Jesus loves everybody, but Jesus couldn't love everybody. It's not possible. It's illogical. And so I want to love who loves me. And I want to dislike the people that I dislike.
And that's good. I think that's good. And not feel guilty about it.
No.
It is. There you go. Well, we're running, and I'm really, we're running out of time, but so I wanted to end with the question from Lisa, who says, I am a teacher for elementary inner city scholars. How would you motivate our young readers to connect with the daily experiences of life and to put those into words?
My first suggestion is your young reader probably doesn't care about the daily experiences of life. That's something that you get to when you're older. Why not deal with the imaginative experiences? What are you, if you wouldn't be, I don't know what, you say elementary, if you wouldn't be in the 5th grade, what would you be? If you could be your puppy or your cat, or if you could be a baker, why can't you be what you imagine? We're not asking you to change the world. We're not asking you to know that. You will eventually know things. You will eventually. I was talking about the diseases. You will eventually remember what the COVID did. But we no more remember COVID right now than we do the Spanish, what is called the Spanish flu, which we don't know why. Every disease is always somebody else. It's never the American. It's never Donald.
That's a good
Donald
point.
Trump, murder. So it's never anything that makes sense. It's always going to be somebody else. So let's talk about if you could be what? If you could be a bird, if you could be a hummingbird, let them be their imagination and praise them for it, because they should be allowed to be something else. I wouldn't want to be a fly because people tend to hit flies. But then maybe if I were a fly, if I had another friend who was a fly and we had I don't know. I would like, if I were going to be a little four-legged, I would certainly like to be a little mouse. I think the mice are so cute and they're so sweet and they have such a nice community. And my favorite book is Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim.
Oh, right.
So I love that. So let them be something else. They don't have to be reality. They don't have to be what is happening, because one day what's happening will be what is. Let them be happy with it now. I don't know if that's a good answer, Lisa. I'm sorry.
It is a very good answer. And let them think about what they could be. Maybe the daily experiences, let them get out of that and give them a chance to imagine and think about things. And those things might help them. Because you, Miss Nikki, you have certainly helped us tonight. And I can't thank you enough for answering questions and being part of this. You've got a package coming of books for me, you know that. And I just thank you so much. And thank everyone that's been watching for your questions, Lisa and Terrence. And the National Book Festival is going to continue tomorrow, and there are live events. So just go on the website, loc.gov bookfest. So thank you, Miss Nikki, and thank everyone for being with us, and have a safe and good night.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.